The Sunset Theater, Carmel, California, October 12, 1988. 2,000 people packed into the big, beautiful room. They were expecting a fun night of music. They were expecting to see Clint Eastwood, the famous movie star, play some simple jazz tunes on the piano. But sitting in the very front row, with his arms crossed tightly across his chest, was Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a very famous man in the music world. He was a piano master. He had trained the best concert piano players for 40 years. He was known for being very strict. He had even said in public that movie stars who tried to play music were just making musical garbage. Arthur had come to the show for one reason only. He wanted to prove to everyone that Clint Eastwood was a fake. In Arthur's jacket pocket was a piece of paper. On this paper, Arthur had drawn musical notes by hand. It was a very hard piano song. He called it the Bach Trial. The notes were so hard to read and play that it usually took 10 years of strict training to get them right. Halfway through Clint's first song, Arthur Sterling stood up from his seat. He walked right up to the edge of the stage. He looked up at the famous actor. Then, he spoke loud enough for everyone in the front rows to hear. "Play this," Arthur said, holding out the piece of paper, "and I will admit that you are a real piano player." He handed the paper to Clint. The big room went completely dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Clint Eastwood looked down at the musical notes. His jaw got tight. He looked very serious. Every single person playing an instrument on that stage knew what was going to happen next. You do not challenge a tough guy like Clint Eastwood in front of 2,000 people and expect him to just walk away. But what nobody in that big theater knew was that Clint had a secret. He had kept this secret hidden for many, many years. And this secret was about to change everything they thought they knew about the famous movie star. Arthur Sterling was not just a regular piano teacher. He was a legend. He had trained players who went on to play at the biggest and best music halls in the whole world. His students played at fancy places like Carnegie Hall. He had been on television shows to show people the right way to play the piano. And he hated actors who tried to play music with a passion that was almost crazy. To Arthur Sterling, Clint Eastwood was everything that was wrong with famous people today. He thought Clint had no real training. He thought Clint had no respect for real, classic music. He thought Clint was just a guy who made movies about shooting bad guys and then pretended he could play the piano. Arthur had even written angry letters to newspapers about it. He had gone on the radio to say that actors should stick to acting. So when Arthur bought a front row ticket to Clint's music show, he came ready for a fight. The music notes that Arthur had written on that paper were not just hard. They were made to be impossible for anyone who did not have years and years of strict classical piano training. To play the song, a person had to make every single finger move on its own. This takes most students 5 whole years to learn. It required a deep understanding of how music works together, which is something you cannot fake. It needed perfect timing across the whole keyboard at the exact same time. Arthur Sterling had used this very same test to embarrass cocky music students for many decades. Every single one of them had failed. He fully expected Clint to laugh it off. He thought Clint would make a funny joke, smile at the crowd, and hand the paper back. That is what famous people did when they got caught doing something they did not really know how to do. They told jokes. They smiled. They used their charm to escape. That was exactly what Arthur was counting on. He wanted the exact moment when Clint would show everyone that he was just a movie star who could not actually play real music. But Clint Eastwood did not hand the paper back. The big theater had gone completely silent. It was not the happy, excited kind of quiet that happens right before a great song. It was an uncomfortable quiet. 2,000 people were sitting still, watching a moment that felt like it might go very, very wrong. The other players in the band looked at each other with wide eyes. Tommy Vance, who played the bass guitar for Clint, later said he felt his stomach drop all the way to the floor. This was not part of the plan. This was not part of the show. This was something else completely. Clint stood there on the stage. He read the notes on the paper. His face was blank. You could not tell what he was thinking. But behind his blank face, Clint was thinking about a memory. It was a memory he almost never talked about with anyone. It was a memory of an old piano teacher in Oakland, California. Her name was Martha Higgins. She was an old widow who had offered to teach young Clint for free because his family did not have enough money to pay for her lessons. This was back in the 1940s. This was long before Clint Eastwood ever acted in a movie. This was before he was a famous cowboy or a tough cop on the movie screen. This was before anyone knew his name. Martha Higgins was a 75-year-old woman. She had studied music at a very famous school in the East before she moved to California. She taught young Clint every single Wednesday afternoon for 4 whole years. She did not teach him simple songs. She did not teach him jazz or blues. She taught him hard classical music. She taught him Bach, Mozart, and Chopin. Martha made him practice his piano scales until his fingers hurt. She taught him how chords work together. She taught him how to sit up perfectly straight on the piano bench. She taught him how to breathe the right way when he played. She was very strict. At first, she scared the young boy, but she saw something very special in him. She saw a real gift. She saw the kind of talent that cannot be taught, only made better. When Clint was a teenager, he got older and started looking for jobs. Before he stopped his lessons, Martha made him promise her something important. She grabbed his young hands, looked him right in the eye, and said, "Do not ever let anyone tell you that you are not a real musician. You have a special gift. But do not waste your time trying to prove yourself to people who have already made up their minds to hate you. Play for the people who want to hear you, not the ones who want to break you down." Clint kept that promise for a very long time. He never talked about Martha. He never told reporters about his classical piano training. He never tried to prove to angry teachers that he knew how to read hard music. He figured his old teacher was right. Some people would always judge him because he was an actor. Some people would hate him no matter what he did. So why waste his energy trying to change their minds? But standing on that stage in Carmel, holding Arthur Sterling's piece of paper, something inside Clint changed. Maybe it was the disrespect. Maybe it was the fact that this man assumed Clint was just a movie star who got lucky. Maybe it was the way Arthur smirked at him, looking so proud and mean. Or maybe Clint was just tired of letting people think he did not understand the one thing he had loved his whole life. Whatever the reason was, Clint folded the piece of paper. He put it in his pocket. "You want me to play this right now?" Clint asked. His voice was quiet, but it was very strong. Anyone who knew him could hear the toughness in it. "If you can," Arthur Sterling said. He spoke loud enough for the first few rows to hear him clearly. "But I understand if you would rather just stick to playing what you know." His mean attitude hung in the air like thick, dark smoke. Clint turned around to look at his band. "Take a break," he said. They did not move at first. They were too confused. "Go on. I will call you back when I am ready," Clint told them. Tommy Vance later said it was the strangest moment of his whole life. They had been in the middle of a great show, right in the middle of a song, and suddenly, Clint was telling them to leave the stage. It looked like he was about to do something he had to do all by himself. The band walked off the stage very slowly. They still held their instruments in their hands. The giant crowd watched them leave. Everyone was totally confused. Now, the big stage was completely empty except for Clint Eastwood and the piano. It was a huge grand piano. It was painted shiny black. It looked beautiful under the warm yellow stage lights. Clint usually played it to softly back up the band. He never made it the main event. He walked over to the shiny black piano now. His steps were slow and sure. He sat down on the leather bench. The whole theater held its breath. Arthur Sterling leaned back in his front row seat. He kept his arms crossed. He still had that mean, proud smirk on his face. He had seen this happen before. He had seen people act brave when they were really scared. He knew that in about 30 seconds, Clint would mess up the very first notes. Clint would realize the song was too hard. Then, Clint would make a joke to make the crowd laugh so he wouldn't look foolish. Arthur Sterling had embarrassed much better piano players than Clint Eastwood. Clint pulled the folded piece of paper out of his pocket. He smoothed it out flat with his hands. He set it up on the music stand in front of him. He rested his hands right above the black and white keys. For just 1 second, he closed his eyes. And in that 1 second, Clint was not in a giant theater in Carmel. He was not a famous movie star putting on a show for 2,000 people. He was a young boy again. He was sitting in Martha Higgins's small living room in Oakland. He could hear her voice in his head. Her voice was strict, but it was kind. "Feel the keys before you push them down," her voice said. Music is not about hitting things hard. It is about feeling a connection to the notes. Clint opened his eyes. He pushed down his fingers and played the first chord. The sound that came out of that big piano made 3 people in the front row gasp out loud. It was not just the right notes. It was totally perfect. The space between the notes, the loudness, the ringing sound, every single piece of the chord was crystal clear. It was perfectly balanced. It was the kind of piano playing that takes years and years of very hard work to learn. It rang through the big theater like a giant church bell. Arthur Sterling's smirk disappeared from his face in a flash. Clint did not stop. He moved right into the next part of the song. His fingers danced across the black and white keys. They moved so fast and so perfectly, it seemed completely impossible for a man who had just looked at the paper 1 minute ago. This was not a man who was struggling to read the notes. This was a man who truly understood the music. He could see how the notes fit together like a puzzle. He knew exactly what each sound was supposed to do and why it was there. The hard song Arthur had written forced the left hand and the right hand to do completely different things at the exact same time. The hands had to play different speeds and different patterns. Most students took many months just to learn how to make their hands do that. Clint played it like he had been practicing this exact song every day for weeks. By the 4th line of music, everyone could hear how good his training was. They heard the way he used the foot pedal on the floor. He did not step on it all the time. He used it carefully. He let some notes ring out long and beautiful, but he cut other notes short and sharp. They saw the way his wrists stayed loose and relaxed, even when his fingers were moving as fast as lightning. They heard how he played some notes loud to make a point, and played other notes soft as a whisper. This was real classical piano training. It was true, hard training. It was the kind you could never fake. In row 7, a woman named Betty Jenkins started to cry. Betty was a piano teacher from Oregon. She later told the news reporters that she had been teaching piano for 20 years. She said she had never, ever heard a person look at a brand new piece of paper and play it so perfectly on the first try. "I had no idea," Betty kept whispering to herself. "I had absolutely no idea he could play like that." The theater was so quiet that you could hear the soft thumping sound of the piano's parts moving inside the big wooden box. Arthur Sterling sat frozen in his chair. His face had changed from a mean, proud smile to total confusion. Now, he looked like he was in shock. This was not possible. He had written this test himself. He made it to be totally impossible for anyone who had not gone to a fancy music school. He had used it to embarrass dozens of proud students. Nobody ever played this song perfectly on the first try. Nobody. But Clint was not just playing the notes perfectly. He was making the song sound beautiful. That was the biggest difference between Clint Eastwood and the young students Arthur had tested before. Those young students could hit the right keys if they practiced enough. They could play the song like a robot, but they played it like a math test. It sounded cold and empty. Clint played it like a beautiful piece of art. He played it like he felt the notes in his heart. He understood how the notes were supposed to make the listeners feel. There was deep emotion in his playing. It was the same cool, powerful feeling he brought to his acting, but now he was pouring it straight into the piano keys. Halfway through the hard song, Clint did something amazing. He added some notes that were not even on Arthur's paper. He made a small change to the chords in the middle of the song. It was a very smart change. It made the whole song sound deeper and richer. It was a special touch. It proved that Clint did not just follow the rules of music. He knew the rules so well that he knew exactly when to break them to make the song sound better. That was the exact moment Arthur Sterling knew this was not a magic trick. This was not just lucky playing. This was not a song Clint had secretly practiced at home. This was true training. It was real, honest, years-long classical piano training. It was the kind of deep skill you cannot learn in a few weeks. It takes a whole decade of hard work to play like that. Clint reached the very last part of the paper. The end of the song was the hardest part of all. It had many notes that all had to end at the exact same time across the whole keyboard. If a player made even a tiny mistake, it would sound messy and terrible. Clint played it perfectly. The final, giant chord rang out across the huge room. It sounded pure and powerful. The beautiful sound hung in the air for 3 whole seconds before it slowly faded away into quiet, silence, complete, totally blank silence. 2,000 people sat completely still. They were trying to understand what their eyes and ears had just told them. This was not supposed to happen. Clint Eastwood was a tough guy movie star. He frowned on camera and held a fake badge. He did not play super hard classical piano music like a master from a fancy school, but he just had. Clint stood up from the piano bench very slowly. His face was completely calm. He looked right down at Arthur Sterling. Clint did not say a word. He did not brag. He did not smile. He just looked at the old teacher with a quiet look that said everything that needed to be said. Arthur Sterling stood up too. His face had turned completely white. For the first time in his 40 years of teaching, the grumpy master was totally speechless. Then Arthur did something that shocked everyone in the room. He began to clap. It was not a slow, mean clap. It was real clapping. It was loud, respectful, true applause. He clapped his hands together fast and hard. After 2 seconds, the entire theater exploded. 2,000 people jumped up from their seats. They clapped. They yelled. They whistled. The noise was so loud it hurt the ears. It sounded like thunder. Arthur Sterling walked right up to the edge of the stage again. Clint stood there and watched him come closer. Clint still looked totally calm. When Arthur reached the stage, he stopped and looked up at the tall movie star. "I was wrong," Arthur said. His voice was shaking a little bit. "I was completely wrong about you." Clint nodded his head one time. "I had a very good teacher," Clint said in a simple voice. "Who?" Arthur asked him. "Who taught you how to play like that?" "Her name was Martha Higgins," Clint answered. "From Oakland, California. She taught me for 4 years when I was just a boy. She never made my parents pay a single penny for the lessons." Arthur Sterling's eyes opened very wide. "Martha Higgins? The Martha Higgins from the Eastern Conservatory?" "Yes, sir," Clint said. "I know exactly who she is," Arthur said. "She was a legend. I did not know she moved to California. I did not know she ever taught private lessons to children." Arthur shook his head very slowly. He was still in shock. "Well, that explains everything. Martha did not just teach people to press keys. She taught people how to be true artists." The giant crowd was still cheering and clapping. The noise shook the walls of the theater. Clint looked out at the sea of people. He saw all of their faces looking back at him. They were looking at him with a brand new kind of respect. It felt strange to Clint. He felt very open. He felt like he had just shown everyone a secret piece of his heart that he had hidden away for decades. But at the same time, it felt really good. It felt right. Tommy Vance and the rest of the band came walking back onto the stage. They still looked totally confused, but they were all smiling big smiles. Clint walked over to the tall microphone stand in the middle of the stage. He waited for the loud clapping to stop. It took a whole minute for the big room to get quiet again. "Thank you," Clint said into the microphone. His deep voice echoed in the room. "That was not exactly how I planned to start the second half of our show tonight." A wave of soft, happy laughter rolled through the crowd. It sounded warm and nice. "That man down there who challenged me," Clint said, pointing a finger at Arthur. "He is not wrong to want piano players to prove that they have real skill. Music is a very serious thing. It is important. And I have never, ever wanted to disrespect music, even when people thought that acting in movies meant I could not be a real player." Clint stopped talking for a second. He wanted to make sure he used the right words. "My old piano teacher taught me that music is just music," Clint said. "It does not matter if it is a fancy song by Bach or if it is the background music in a cowboy movie. It does not matter if you are playing in a giant, fancy concert hall or if you are playing in a tiny, dirty jazz club. The only thing that matters is if you respect the music. It matters if you put your whole heart into it. It matters if you make the people listening feel something real inside themselves." My quote. The big theater got completely quiet again, but this time it was not an uncomfortable quiet. It was a listening quiet. Every single person in the room was hanging on his every word. "I know some folks think movie actors should just stick to acting," Clint said, "and that is okay. They are allowed to think that. But I want all of you to know something tonight. The exact same hands I used to hold props in the movies are the hands that learned how to play music from a 75-year-old lady. She made me practice my scales until my fingers ached. She gave me a beautiful gift that I have kept with me my whole life, And because of her, I have never once taken music for a joke." Clint's voice got a little softer. It sounded very personal. "She passed away a long, long time ago," Clint said. "She never got to see me get famous. She never knew that all those Wednesday afternoon piano lessons would end up mattering so much to me. I think about her every single time I sit down on a piano bench. I think about how she believed in a poor kid from Oakland who could not even afford to buy his own sheet music." Several people out in the audience were crying now. They were not crying loudly. They were just letting quiet tears roll down their cheeks. It was the kind of crying that happens when a story touches your heart in a place you did not expect. Clint looked down at Arthur Sterling. The strict old teacher was still standing right by the stage. "Thank you for challenging me tonight, sir," Clint said to him. "Martha would have really liked you." Arthur nodded his head. His own eyes were wet with tears. "It would have been a great honor to meet her," Arthur said, loud enough for the microphone to pick it up. "And it is a true honor to be proven completely wrong by one of her best students." What happened next became a famous story. It became one of those legendary music nights that people tell stories about over and over again until it sounds like magic. Clint invited Arthur Sterling to stay for the rest of the show. But he did not just want Arthur to sit in his seat. Clint asked Arthur to come up and sit on the stage. The crew brought out a nice chair and placed it right next to the shiny black piano. From there, Arthur could watch Clint's hands as he played. Arthur said yes. For the next hour and a half, Clint played his regular music. He played jazz, he played blues, and he played slow, pretty songs. He played all the stuff he was famous for playing when he was not acting. But several times during the night, Clint would sit down at the piano for a special song, and every single time he did, he would look over at the old master sitting next to him. And every time, Arthur Sterling would be watching Clint's hands with a look of pure wonder. Arthur looked like a man who was finally seeing something beautiful that he had kept his eyes closed to for 40 years. During one slow, sad jazz song, Clint added classical music chords underneath the main tune. They were very quiet, smart touches. Most of the people in the crowd probably did not even notice them. But those little touches made Arthur lean forward in his chair with a giant smile. During a fast, fun song, Clint used the exact same hand skills that Martha had taught him back in Oakland. He played loud and soft perfectly. His left hand and right hand did a perfect dance. He was not trying to show off. He was just mixing it all together. It was true proof that everything he had ever learned, and everything Martha had ever taught him, lived inside every single kind of music he ever played. By the time the show was over, Arthur Sterling was standing on his feet, clapping just as loud as everyone else. But now, there were real tears running down the old man's face. He was not ashamed of his tears at all. After the show ended, everyone went behind the stage. Arthur went to find Clint's dressing room. "I need to say I am sorry," Arthur told Clint. "I am not just sorry about tonight. I am sorry for years and years of being wrong. I am sorry for saying mean things about you and about other musicians without ever really understanding what I was talking about." Clint was changing out of his nice stage suit and putting on his regular, comfortable clothes. Suddenly, he looked a lot more tired than he had looked out under the bright stage lights. "You do not need to say you are sorry," Clint said nicely. "You thought what you thought. That is fair." "No, it is not fair at all," Arthur said. "I was too proud. I acted like a snob. I thought that just because something was different from the music I knew best, it had to be bad music. That is not how a person who truly loves music should act. That is just being mean and snobby." Clint stopped what he was doing and looked at the old man for a long time. "Do you know what Martha told me one time?" Clint asked. "She told me the very worst musicians in the world are the ones who think there is only one right way to be good. She said, 'Music is a giant house. It is big enough for everyone who wants to take it seriously.'" "She was absolutely right," Arthur said quietly. "I have been teaching music for 40 whole years, and I am just now learning a lesson that she already knew a long time ago." The two men sat down and talked for 20 minutes. They talked about music, they talked about practicing, they talked about Martha Higgins. They talked about the big difference between just pressing the right keys and playing with a true, honest heart. They agreed that popular music was not the enemy of classical music. Popular music was not destroying anything. It was just a different way for people to show their feelings and connect with each other. Before Arthur finally left to go home, he reached out and shook Clint's hand. "If you ever decide you want to play a full classical music show," Arthur told him, "I know the bosses at every big music hall in America. I could make one single phone call and you could be playing your piano at Carnegie Hall next week." Clint smiled. He looked very tired, but his smile was real and happy. "I really thank you for that," Clint said. "But I think I am doing exactly what I am supposed to be doing right now." Arthur nodded his head. "Martha trained you very, very well," the old man said. "She did not just make you a great piano player. She made you a real artist who knows his own heart." News about what happened that night spread incredibly fast. By the time the sun came up the very next morning, almost every big newspaper in the country had printed the story. The headlines read, "Clint Eastwood plays hard classical piano. Shocks famous music teacher." The local newspaper put a giant picture on its front page. It was a picture of Arthur and Clint shaking hands behind the stage. Big music magazines wrote long stories about Clint's hidden piano training. Reporters even drove to Oakland to find people who used to live near Clint when he was a boy. They found old neighbors who remembered seeing young Clint walking down the street to Martha Higgins's house every Wednesday afternoon. The news reporters even found Martha's nephew. He still lived in the same area. They asked him questions. He gave the reporters old pictures of Martha. He told them stories about how strict she was when she taught. He proved to everyone that the story was completely true. Yes, she had taught young Clint for 4 years. The nephew said he had no idea the lessons had mattered so much to the famous actor. He just thought it was a nice thing his old aunt did for a family that did not have much money. A secret tape recording of that special night was found a few years later. The sound on the tape was very fuzzy and bad. It had been recorded on a tiny, cheap tape player by a fan sitting way back in row 20. But even with the bad sound, you could hear the music perfectly. You could hear Clint play that incredibly hard song without making a single mistake. You could hear the crowd gasp in shock. You could hear Arthur Sterling start to clap his hands. People who collected music loved that tape. They traded copies of it for many years. They treated it like it was a magic treasure. The events of that night changed things in ways Clint never could have guessed. Big music schools started to change the way they taught their students. They thought, if Clint Eastwood, the tough movie star, has real classical training, then maybe the walls between different kinds of music are not as strong as we thought. They realized that a student could love to play Mozart and also love to play jazz. They realized that being a very serious player did not mean you had to pick only one style and hate all the others. Arthur Sterling himself changed completely. After that night, the strict old master started going to jazz shows. He started going to pop concerts. He paid close attention to how the bands played. He learned from them. A few years later, Arthur wrote a book. The book was called The Fake Wall: Why Every Kind of Music is Important. The book became so popular that many music schools made their students read it. The very first page of the book was a special letter written to Clint Eastwood. The letter thanked the famous actor for teaching an old, stubborn teacher that he still had so much to learn about art. Later on, Arthur Sterling used his own money to start the Martha Higgins Music Fund at a big school in California. This fund paid for classical piano lessons for poor children who could not afford to learn. The rules of the fund told the young students that they should learn many different kinds of music. It taught them that music is just one big, beautiful language that has many different voices. Clint heard about the special music fund. He sent a check for $10,000 to help. He included a short note. The note said, "Martha would be so happy about this. Thank you for making sure people remember her name." But maybe the biggest change of all was something much smaller and much more personal. After that amazing night in Carmel, Clint stopped hiding that part of his life. When people interviewed him on television, he would talk about Martha. He would talk about those long Wednesday afternoons in Oakland. He would talk about how much his fingers hurt from practicing scales. He would talk about how he learned that working hard and being creative were not enemies. They were best friends. He completely stopped keeping his musical training a secret, and by telling his true story, he gave thousands of other people the courage to stop hiding their own secrets. He showed other players that they did not have to pretend to be just one simple thing. He showed them that it was wonderful to be complex and to use everything they had ever learned. The night of October 12, 1988, started out as a mean trick. It started as a challenge. It was a plan to embarrass Clint Eastwood and make him look foolish in front of 2,000 people, but it ended up being something completely beautiful. It was a huge reveal. It was solid proof that the very best artists in the world are the ones who hold many different pieces inside themselves. They are the people who cannot be put into tiny boxes. Clint never played that super hard piece of music on a stage ever again. He did not need to play it twice. He had already proven exactly what he needed to prove. He did not really prove it to Arthur Sterling, or even to the crowd. He proved it to himself. He proved that Martha's long lessons had mattered. He proved that respecting where he came from did not mean he was trapped there forever. If you ever go to the Sunset Theater in Carmel, California, you can find a small metal sign. It is hidden away in a quiet hallway behind the main stage. It is very easy to walk right past it if you do not know it is hanging there. The metal sign says, "On this stage, October 12, 1988, Clint Eastwood honored his teacher, Martha Higgins, by showing the entire world that real music has no walls." Most regular people just walk right past the little sign. But piano players and singers always stop. They stand there and read the words very carefully. They think about the teachers who helped them when they were young. They think about all their secret skills. They think about the times they had to choose between looking cool and showing the world their true, honest heart. And sometimes, if the hallway is very quiet, you might hear a person read the sign and whisper out loud, "I had absolutely no idea that Clint Eastwood could play classical piano." That is the funny thing about famous people who change the world. We think we know everything about them. We look at the characters they play in the movies. We listen to the simple stories people tell about them. We take all of their amazing, complicated pieces and we stuff them into small, neat boxes to make them easier to understand. But the real artists, the ones whose names we remember forever, are always much bigger than the tiny boxes we try to put them in. They are full of surprises. They have many different sides. They refuse to let the world tell them they can only be one thing, even when being one thing would be much easier and make them more money. Clint Eastwood could have easily handed that piece of paper right back to Arthur Sterling. He could have laughed a big laugh. He could have told a funny joke into the microphone. He could have just moved right along with the jazz show. That is what every single person in the big theater expected him to do. That is what would have been safe and easy. But he chose to do the hard thing. He chose to be brave. He chose to be open. He took a giant risk. He showed the world a secret he had protected since he was a little boy. He chose to honor an old widow from Oakland who never got to see him become a huge star. That single brave choice changed everything. It did not change Clint. He was the exact same man before he played the piano and after he played the piano. But it completely changed how the whole world looked at him. It changed how people understood what it really meant to be an artist. It changed how people thought about different kinds of music getting along together. Sometimes, the moments in life that matter the absolute most are the ones we never plan for at all. They are the surprise moments. They are the sudden challenges that force us to make a choice. We have to choose between staying comfortable or telling the total truth. We have to choose between hiding behind a mask or showing everyone our real face. Clint chose the truth. And because he chose the truth, he finally gave Martha Higgins the big thank you that she deserved for her whole life. He built a bridge between classical piano and popular music. And he gave every single person who heard his story the courage to be more than just one simple thing. Have you ever hidden a special part of who you are because you thought other people would laugh at you? Have you ever stayed quiet about something you love because it did not fit the way your friends see you? What would it take for you to finally choose to be brave instead of just being safe? If this story made you feel something special inside, please share it with someone who needs a reminder today. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they do not have to live inside a tiny box. Tell them that honoring every piece of their past and saying thank you to every person who ever taught them something good is not a weak thing to do. It is the strongest thing a person can do. Drop a comment below about a special teacher who changed your life. Tell us about someone who helped you but never got a shiny trophy or their name in the newspaper. Let us take a moment to honor all the Martha Higginses out there in the world. The wonderful people who teach others just because they have love in their hearts, not because they want to be famous. And if you want to read more amazing secret stories about the exact moments that showed us who our favorite famous people really are, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications. These stories are not just about playing the piano or acting in movies. They are about the incredible bravery it takes to be your true, honest self, even when the whole entire world is watching you.